The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, Part 2. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty icy bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. That's right. Is this another Snowmageddon? It's not quite as bad. Only a day, maybe two.
Yeah.
Last year it was...
Well, we'll see what happens.
7 days, yeah. But yes, this is... we're recording on the eve of this storm rolling in, so that should be fun. It's always fun for us in Texas to have stuff like this happen. It is to me, anyway. I know it does lots of infrastructure damage, but, a plumber should have good jobs after this.
Yep.
And we learned a lot of lessons from last year that we will not... mistakes that we will not be repeating here, so... hopefully, once I get done down here, I'm going to go back up to the Allen compound up at the top and drain the pipes.
Oh, yeah.
To keep them from exploding in the attic. So.
Man. I got all my stuff covered up.
Yeah, your stuff's...
I got stuff covered, lights on.
You didn't have any busted pipes last time, did you? Yeah. Huh?
Nope.
No.
No busted pipes.
We had a lot, so this time going to drain them. Not just let them drip, but actually drain them, because why risk it?
Yeah. This time I have a fireplace.
Right,
Propane.
you've got a gas fireplace in your house, which will help if we lose power. You'll have a way to heat the place. We've got gas.
Last time I had my truck backed up by the sliding glass door with an extension cord, run into the house with one heat lamp, which was all that my truck's power outlet could power. And the whole family was like huddled under this heat lamp, trying to sleep.
Oh, God. Well, I got some updates. Last episode, I told you all about what was happening with the feed, sort of. I told you that there was a major update coming. That is complete.
Yay!
So there was a lot of work on my end. I had to go through all 229 episodes manually multiple times in various different places. So the website has been updated to reflect the new server and feed service, so that there's a better player. Like before, the website just had a download link for the episode plus a little, default player, which was, as Jeff in the Discord said, takes no prisoners. That player is evil. So we have one in there now that's kind of a spiffy, much better player, custom code, and it shows the show art. And so show art should also be much better. I fixed the show art for every episode that has it with this new service, which is Libsyn, by the way. Liberated Syndication, I think is what that is.
Yep.
So there should be high resolution show art for every episode. I've noticed some people, I've seen their screenshots, and the show art would show up as like this really horribly pixelated because somehow the FeedBurner wasn't working with everyone's podcast player, and they would just get the thumbnail and it would try to blow the thumbnail up to full size, and it doesn't work. So anyway, that's fixed. Yes, the other thing you should notice is that all 220 something episodes are now available in the feed. There is no need for an archive anymore. So if you refresh your feed and scroll all the way back, it should go all the way back to episode 2, which is the very first episode. Fair warning to those of you who have not heard those early episodes. The first 50 or so are foul in terms of language.
We used all of our best curse words we had.
That's right.
Time.
Right. Used them up. And of course, I was going
through
until
our friends with kids complained.
And I was going through and looking at the descriptions for some of those, and I'm just like, we were like totally not taking this seriously at all. The descriptions are ridiculous. But still, it's there.
It's the evolution of a podcast.
Right. It's there for the taking. And of course, all the episodes are still available on the website. And there is a nifty little search function on the upper left of the website. If you want to find a particular episode, just type in the episode number, 055, for example. If you want to find episode 55, we'll pull it up instantly on the website. What else? What else happened? Okay, the YouTube channel. So during all this updating and upgrading, I did the same. I was like, well, I might as well check all the YouTube episodes. And I went through and checked all those. Now, a lot of you have probably noticed that we've turned monetization on. So there's multiple reasons for that, which I have mentioned before. But one reason was that YouTube was basically putting ads in, or said that they would, if they wanted to, put ads into your videos, whether you were monetized or not. So I was like, well, if we're going to be putting ads in there anyway, we might as well monetize and get paid for those ads. And then when we did turn monetization on, it put them in there way too much.
Oh, really?
Way too much. Yeah, we got multiple complaints for people like, why are ads playing every 2 minutes?
Oh, my God.
You know? So I finally figured out where to fix that. Sorry about that. I managed to bulk fix the ad plays in the YouTube, so they should only play at the beginning and the end, nowhere in the middle, not even in the breaks.
Fast forward all of them.
Well, there's unskippable ads.
Oh, jeez.
What, you want me to turn off the unskippable ads?
I don't care.
I can bulk turn off the unskippable
Look,
ads.
the podcast was made for an RSS feed, not videos.
Right. If you hate the ads, listen to it on the RSS feed. Stop using YouTube. Or the other thing I was going to suggest to you YouTubers who are just like serious about using it on YouTube instead of in a feed where podcasts are supposed to be listened to, you can use an app if you have an Android called NewPipe. No ads ever, even in the most monetized channel, will ever show up if you use YouTube videos in NewPipe. That's what I use. Okay? So
Get
stop.
NewPipe,
Yeah.
man.
That's right. You can look it up. You can find the most recent version on GitHub. I know it works for Android. They may have a version for iPhones. I don't know, but it's just called NewPipe. You cannot find it in the Play Store because Google owns YouTube and they want the ads to play.
Oh.
So you have to install it from, a file.
I personally hate ads. I live an ad-free life.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I just don't watch TV.
The other thing that having the monetization on is that when we do live streams, which we did a lot in Egypt and we've been doing from the studio, is that people can do super chats, which is basically a donation direct through the chat during the live stream, which is cool. So while we were in Egypt and we were live streaming, people were asking like, why can't I donate?
Yeah, that was amazing.
So that was another reason to turn it on. You have to have monetization on in order to do super chats. So, and that also meant I had to give YouTube a bunch of tax information. A whole bunch of crap I had to deal with.
Did you
Anyway.
do the Holocene the stuff or your own personal stuff?
Well, they wanted, I did it direct to my bank account. Yeah.
We need to get Holocene.
Well, I talked to Laura about it because she runs that. I was like, can I run the taxes through Holocene or as it is, I just did it as personal.
Okay.
So,
well, that's cool.
They're going to send me a W-2 or whatever.
A W-9, yeah.
Or a W-9 or something, whatever it is. Yes, and the other question that I've seen is like, in response to the update of the podcast is like, well, I hope the update means that you guys are going to be doing video shows. No. No, that's not the update. We have video podcasts.
I don't even look at Russ while he's reading books. I just sit here and stare at the floor. What's the point?
Right. Right. So multiple questions on like, does this mean you're upgrading to a full video podcast? Nope.
That's not an upgrade.
It's not. And it's a lot more work for us and we don't want to do it. We have video when it's necessary because like, for example, a guest wants to share images. Otherwise, no, it's not a video show. We're not talking heads. I mean, we are, but you can't see us being talking heads. You can only hear it.
And we have superb foul vocabularies that we do not use on the show anymore.
That's right. Is that it? Is that everything I was going to do with the update? Yeah, I think so. I think that's it. So let's go ahead and do Space Brother News.
All right.
From spaceweather.com. CME impact fails to produce a storm. A coronal mass ejection hit Earth's magnetic field on February 1st. Despite jolting magnetometers as far south as Hawaii, the impact did not produce a geomagnetic storm. Not yet. NOAA forecasters cautioned that a storm is still possible on February 2nd as Earth moves through the CME's magnetized wakes. If so, it would probably be the weakest category, G1. Solar wind speed. So current conditions, solar wind speed is 505.3 kilometers per second, and the density is a pretty high 11.2 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 88. The neutron count is 7.6% above the space age average, and the KP index right now is quiet at 1, but the 24-hour max was 4, which is the low end of unsettled.
Is that a picture of the current face of the sun there?
Which one?
There's
There's multiple shows.
Oh.
That one, and then this is the coronal hole. This is a different, like looking at the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, spaceweather.com has lots of cool sun information. That's the solar disk with the location of the current Earth-facing sunspots. And then that's the atmosphere so that you can see holes in the atmosphere. Okay.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever it's doing out there. Not keeping us warm, that's for sure.
Not here. All right, we have emails. We're going to tackle some emails.
Yep.
Okay.
My news feed has just gone. It's trash.
He's decided it's trash.
I've been.
You need to just go through and clean it out.
Well, I
revamp
did
it.
already, and then I was like searching for new sources and stuff, and I'm just randomly picking things based on the quick descriptions that I read, and it's just not turning up good material.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Oh, that does remind me. There was a couple other things I was going to say about YouTube. This is hilarious. This was hilarious to me. So because monetization is turned on, I'm now able to see a bunch of stats about the videos of our episodes. And one thing that I noticed was there's a couple interesting things, because YouTube will go in, the algorithm will go in and flag certain things as not suited for advertisement, or that there's like some kind of copyright issue. So for whatever reason, the algorithm has flagged every episode that has the word legend in the title as not suited for advertisements.
Well,
which is fine.
This show just became unsuitable for advertisements.
Well, as long as I don't put legend in the title.
In the title, okay.
The other thing that makes it unsuited for advertisement because of a copyright issue is every time we've ever used the Indiana Jones theme soundbite, even though it's like less than 5 seconds.
It's not even,
they flag it as like a copyright problem, and therefore we do not get paid for whatever advertisements show on that episode.
I wonder who's getting paid for that.
I'm just saying, I think that's great, because I can be like, and now I know this whole episode will not get paid for it. It's awesome. And yeah, I did a bunch of other cleaning up on the YouTube page too. I got rid of some playlists, I fixed some other things, and just generally did some cleaning up all around on the whole podcast. So
that's good.
I'm totally done with that. Back to video games.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah, I've been working on that for weeks, and so I'm glad it's over.
Big dude is angry.
Oh, do we need to let him back in? Yeah, we're gonna be podcasting with the cat. Just let him in.
Okay.
I'll start this email.
All right.
But this one is one that I think you're gonna want to answer for sure.
Come on, dude.
I think this is from Jonathan, and it's called Spirituality and Snakes. Dear Snake Brothers, I had not intended to write to you so soon, as I still have some catching up to do with the archive shows, although I've spent the last 4 months listening almost constantly. It's been nagging at me lately that the more I listen to the show, the less I feel spiritually connected to the world around me. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad thing. Allow me to explain. In many cases, to build something great, something else must first be torn down to make room. Torn apart and put together again. As I've listened to you and your guests discussing the potential origins of ancient religions and their relationship to the heavens, I've found myself less and less certain of what to believe about the spiritual side of things. I fully believe there is such a side, and that it is as much a part of who we are as is our need to eat and drink. So we must have, So we must have a faith in something greater. That doesn't have to be God or God, like upper or lowercase g God, or the universe or whatever, but it is still important to us. So my question, therefore, is this. How does one begin to put a faith back together when every pantheon and creed has been torn apart or made mute? Again, I'm not complaining. I believe questioning and revising is key to growth, but still, having a spiritual connection to the world is important to me, and at the moment, I feel adrift and somewhat lost. Thank you all for what you do. Keep slithering, and I'll continue to follow the trail. Snakes!
Man, I can totally 100% relate to that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I read this.
I'm still figuring that out. But I can tell you this. When I feel the most spiritually connected to the universe is out in nature and seeing, like, witnessing the beauty and just all the amazing aspects of this world that we live on and the universe around it. I don't know. There's something, I mean, just as simple as like going out at night on a really clear night and looking up at the stars, and it's just there's something about that simple thing right there, and knowing all, like, how vast it is, and the fact that we are so small and insignificant out here on this little thing. So for some reason it feels like, well, no, that's like the knee-jerk reaction is like, we're so small and insignificant. But for some reason, there's like this, the other side of the coin is that, well, but there is a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, I can't really describe it. I've found it just mostly in observing the beauty of nature. And then also in some of these seemingly random yet strangely connected things that occur in life, which we call synchronicities. In some cases, they line up in such a amazing way that it's like, I can't not believe that there's something greater at work here. So I don't know. I can't. It's like we've said this many times about, like, basically what happened is the image, and this is sort of a silly way to put it, but the image of like the bearded guy in the sky is gone.
Yeah.
And there is no image that it's replaced by. The stories that we learned are not directly the actions of the Almighty as they're portrayed in religions, but they are part of the entire story.
Right. Yeah.
So
and,
it's,
well, going back to what you said about, going out and looking at the universe, whether you're looking at nature itself in the, like standing in a forest, or looking at it in the micro sense, or looking up at stars and seeing the macro. And, you get that sense of like being very small, but at the same time, you're like, but I'm here and I'm contemplating it. And that to me is like it doesn't always happen, but sometimes when I go out and do that, there's this overwhelming sense of like, now that's what the purpose is, or that's not what the purpose is, but that is a purpose for me to be here, us to be here, and contemplating this gigantic thing that we're inside of and part of, and feeling a connection to it. Like its mechanisms, in some ways result in the bodies we're using.
Yeah.
And here we are contemplating the machine from the inside of the machine, using the machine's own rules.
Yeah. And own body parts.
Yeah. Right. So yes, but I understand, like I feel like I went through this before, and I'm going to go through it again. It's you tear down old ways of seeing things, and then new ones emerge that are more difficult to put into words, but have a deeper sensation when you experience them, I guess.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a mystery is a big part. Mystery, capital M, mystery, is a big part of the way I love to interact with the universe itself. This idea that there is things to discover, that there are these giant puzzles out there, and tiny puzzles also.
Yeah.
And that's, you may be looking at one puzzle and come up with some kind of interesting way of looking at it that actually unlocks certain pieces of other puzzles. All of that seems on purpose, but of course, you can't say that for sure.
Yeah. I don't know the answer, but I can relate to your journey.
Yeah. Agnostic is what it has made me.
Yeah.
I can't profess to having any particular belief, except the belief that I don't really know what's going on, and I'm going to keep looking at it because it's cool. So I don't know if that's very spiritual, but it does result in spiritual sensations and interactions. Okay, this is from Donna. It says, "Greetings, Snake Brothers. I am so very grateful to you and for what you do. It keeps the gears in my aging brain lubed and spinning freely. If you didn't already have a loving family, I'd adopt both of you in a heartbeat. I was born and raised in southern Vermont, where the Allen surname, as in Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, is common, so you're already practically family. I hope 2022 brings you everything you need to stay joyful and healthy. Thankfully, and with love, from Donna." Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you very much. From Douglas, a.k.a. Ronan Dosho, who that's his name on the Discord. It's called Hey, Russ and Kyle. I've read through and listened to lots of emails sent to you, and I vow not to make this tediously long. Right now, I'm listening to The Book of the Damned report. I'm going to have to get this book, not because you, Russ, are doing a hack job, but you're doing a great form as usual, but so much so that I am compelled to have Charles Fort's books. But I am recommending www.alibris.com. That's ALIBRIS.com for searching for hard-to-find books. I've been using this site for over 10 years. It's way better than Amazon. Just got an upgrade to my SSI and joined the Patreon. So see you on the Discord,
right.
Russ, and maybe Kyle. Maybe Kyle on the Discord in 2022.
Maybe occasionally.
No worries. Finally, I do so miss the Texas Hill Country, but it's clearly in the best of hands. Take care, you guys. Douglas, a.k.a. Ronan Dosho, on the Discord.
Oh, thanks so much,
you.
buddy.
Yeah, I'll check this site out for finding hard-to-find books. I haven't... What was hard to find was a digital version, a Kindle version, basically, of Hamlet's Mill. I had zero problems finding a physical copy. So, But thank you for the recommendation. Okay, this is a book from Arthur. He says, "Dear Serpent Twins and History Shift, I was listening to your episode number 228, Exploring Ancient Montana, and I heard about this megalithic rock and that there's a possible diagonal alignment of 23 degrees. The 23 degrees triggered something in my head, and I immediately went to my email program to send you this message. Earth is tilted at 23.4 degrees relative to the ecliptic. Comets traveling on the ecliptic can impact at this orientation. It is hypothesized that some comet impacts will have formed ellipsoidal-shaped craters with the long axis oriented at 23.4 degrees relative to the equator. In other words, features in the terrain with an angle of... Wait a minute, which ones have made ellipsoidal craters? In other words, features in the terrain with an angle of 23.4 or close alignment can point to cosmic impacts from comets traveling on the ecliptic. The Black Sea, Tarim Basin, and the Great Lakes are examples of such ellipsoidal features whose origins are difficult to explain by tectonic processes and are oriented at 23.4 degrees relative to the equator. I don't know if there's a connection with the Montana megalith, but who knows? Maybe it points at the direction of an ancient impact. Anyhow, I thought this would be useful information for you snakes to know. Next time you are crawling through the ancient landscape or on a tour with Randall, you could keep an extra eye out for features that are tilted 23.4 degrees. They might just point to a comet impact. I have been listening to your podcast for several years now, and you brought me to many interesting topics. I am especially interested in decoding ancient myths myself. My take on the myths is the following. They are mostly about large and bright comet sightings and the cataclysm that sometimes follows in their wake. These events were remembered and composed as poems written in the language of the stars and constellations. Of course, comets travel on the background of the stars at night, traveling from one constellation to the other. When fragments impact, they can cause volcanism and earthquakes for thousands of years in that area. The sky serpent, or god, has now been turned into a chthonic monster or giant, or a god of the volcano or underworld. There are wars between these sky gods and the gods of and the gods or monsters of the earth, the underworld beneath the ground is also reflected in the darkness of the night sky. The stars resemble the gems and crystals in the depths of the earth.
That's cool.
These comet gods are notorious shapeshifters, taking on all sorts of forms by day and by night. This explains transformation in myths and fairy tales. Gods, elves, dwarves, spirits, angels, demons, monsters, and serpents, they are different manifestations of similar events in the sky. And as above, so below, of course, what's in the sky is also on earth. When gods or spirits plunge to earth, they can regrow from the soil as plants and trees. The thunder god also sends fungi. Many of these plants and fungi are medicinal and or hallucinogenic, or at least mind-altering. By ingesting plant gods or spirits, ancient peoples embodied these gods or summoned those beings that they saw in the sky within themselves so that they could communicate with them. These experiences in turn probably influenced the mythical poems themselves and the ancient artwork in which these ideas were expressed. These often have surreal or psychedelic qualities. Add also plasma shapes, solar flares, supernova, micronova, meteor showers and meteor trails, sundogs and rainbows, megaliths and acoustics, geomagnetism and auroras, lightning and sprites, the sun, moon, planets, the seasons, solstices and equinoxes, the Milky Way and precession to the mix, as if all this wasn't complex enough yet. And in the case of legends, some historical elements concerning the deeds of heroes and royal lineages. By the way, some comets contain copious amounts of alcohol, the same kind of ethanol that we like to drink. Mysteries solved. At the moment, I'm comparing the 4 ages of the world scheme in mythology from different cultures. 2 of the things that stand out. In the first age, there were giants made from large stones, according to the myths. There was a big flood in the 3rd age, and we now live in the 4th age, although some add a 5th as the current age. I have a blog about Norse mythology, which I have abandoned after a while because I felt that the scope became too narrow, and I wanted to explore other subjects outside Norse myth as well. And he gives a link, secretsofthenorse.com. He says, I would really like to start a new project, maybe a YouTube channel about ancient myths and megalithic sites. Right now, it has to compete with other things in my life, but I'm still doing research at least. This email is a way to at least share some of these ideas without keeping them to myself. It will probably not be the last email I send you. I look forward to the next episodes. It's always a surprise what topics you come up with. Keep on snaking, and also my regards to Randall and the omniscient watcher with his obsidian mirror from Arthur.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
I like the breakdown of the myths there. I mean, I don't know if I could say that all this is sky stuff, but yeah, a lot of it's definitely sky
definitely.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But that's definitely playing a big role.
Yep. Again, I think back to not thinking back to, I mentioned this on the show at one point, but you know, the sky at night, at least, is this, it's rolling around us. That's what it looks like. Anyway, we're spinning through it, but you just have to wonder, you know, it's fun to go out at night and look up into the sky and try to erase everything you think you know or that modern science and physics has told us about what you're seeing, and then try to just look at it with a completely fresh mind and wonder what ancient people would have thought about it, because they weren't, we look at it through this lens of physics, and you know, these things are billions of light years away and on fire, even though that's not really true. Nothing we can see with the naked eye is that far away, but you know, you have this way of seeing it, and it's through the lens of modern astronomical revelations of physics and stuff like that. But if you try to erase all that and just look up there and you're just like, wow,
yeah,
these points of light are spinning around us, and some of them move in weird ways and are brighter than others, and you can see how this can become stories of gods, you know, especially if you begin to make correlations with things that are happening on the planet to the movements of these things in the sky.
Yeah. And then, of course, the addition of new visitors that don't stick around for very long, and, you know.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
It's really cool stuff.
And yeah, you should do your new project for sure. Okay, so this is from Joseph. He says, hello, Snake Bros. I'm watching your most recent episode, 228 with History Shift, and He says, I'm hearing about this apparent database of interesting locations you have for the first time. I am from southern Arizona, but I'm currently living in central Texas. And I would love to know about any interesting sites in either of these areas to go check out for myself. Any information would be greatly appreciated. Anyways, I'll get back to listening to the rest of the episode now, as it's been very interesting as always. Peace from Joseph. So yeah, central Texas, there's plenty of cool places. It just depends on, where you can go. But like we're, for example, going to go look at Canyon Lake Gorge. There's the cart ruts in Austin. There's also some in Round Rock.
Yeah, I haven't been to those. Lots of cool geological features.
Yeah, there's dinosaur footprints.
Lots of state parks. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much all the big state parks are pretty awesome to go hiking around in the hill country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beyond
Plenty
that,
of caves, too. It just
Yeah.
depends on what you like and, how far you're willing to drive. So,
Yep. You can also get on Texas Churt and probably on Facebook. I think it's a Facebook group, Texas Churt.
Yeah.
And you'd find out about artifact digs that are going on that you can pay to go to and sift for artifacts. If you're into that.
oh, yeah, that's right.
Maybe meet some other people that like to sift for artifacts, and maybe they know some other places you can go walk in creeks and look for artifacts.
Yep.
And I don't know. That's like one of my favorite things to do.
And the Pecos, you can kayak. in
Yeah.
Pecos.
That's
Not anywhere near, that's South Texas.
yeah.
Closer
But
to
still,
Big-
there's some awesome rivers that you can kayak through with big canyons and caves and
Yeah.
petroglyphs.
Go to
and
Big
stuff.
Bend if you haven't. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just saying, people will ask about cool places to go see. And I'm like, well, have you gone and see this major state park? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you should start with that. So, but yeah, I have multiple different things on my computer, ways to look for sites, but a lot of them are, a lot of times they're closed archaeological sites that are difficult to get into. And a lot of times they're open state parks or national parks that people already know about, but there's just sections in them. Like, for example, if you go to Big Bend, go to Ernst Tanaha Canyon.
Oh yeah.
It's one of the coolest features in Big Bend, and it's just not well known. People go up to the Chisos and they, go on the big trails, but Ernst Tanaha is fascinating. So if you get out there, go check that out. And also, I always recommend people use, what's it called? Of course, I can't remember the name now. It's completely slipped my mind.
What is it? Is it an app?
It's a website or an app, yeah. That has all kinds of interesting, weird places to go visit in the U.S. I'll think of it at some point. Just keep listening to the show, and I'll say it when I think of it. Okay, this is from...
There's also a weird audio tick happening that I'm going to have to fix in the break.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just doing that constantly. It's driving me nuts.
This is from Harry. He says, a Ouija board, demon voices, and missing tools. 7 blessings to you, Snake Bros. After listening to the UFO episodes with Marty, I thought I would share an odd experience I had as a younger kid, as I think I encountered one of these trickster spirits that often comes up in conversation. Would love to get your interpretation. So I'll set the scene. This happened a bit over a decade ago when I was about 12 or 13. It's about 9 p.m. and I'm in bed reading a book. A relatively cool summer night in rural New South Wales in Australia. My large window next to my bed is wide open and a gentle breeze blows through. It's a quiet night. No birds are chirping, no possums rustling around in the brush. But out of nowhere, something yells my full name from outside my window. Not just my first name, but my full name, which I've always been perplexed by. And then he says his full name here. I won't say it, but Harrison, bleep, bleep, it yelled. Only my mom says this when I'm in serious trouble. The only way I describe the sound of the voice is that of a demon, very low pitch with a sort of distortion. And it was so loud, it felt like it vibrated my whole body. Instantly, fight or flight mode kicked in, and 12-year-old Harry wasn't too keen on squaring up with a mysterious demon man. So I bolted down to my parents, told them what happened, and we went outside to check around the house. There was no sign of anything. That was my encounter with mysterious demon man. Over the next few years, my stepdad had some bizarre experiences with various objects seemingly disappearing. There's almost too many to list, but most noticeably was a pair of garden clippers. Having just returned from the hardware store after purchasing them, he set them against a fence in the backyard, getting ready to start some yard work. He gathered some more tools, and the clippers had disappeared from behind his back. They even still had the tag on. Among other things were shovels and hammers, petrol for the lawnmower, newspapers, and countless shopping lists. After the disappearing phenomena seemed to die down, my sister then had some frightening experiences. She had a radio in her room that would randomly turn on in the middle of the night and start playing music at full volume. After a few instances, she unplugged the radio from the wall, and to her surprise, it kept turning on. One night, in a similar experience to mine, she had someone or something bang on her window violently 3 times. Again, she ran to our parents. They checked outside. There was no sign of anything around. Her room was right on the edge of the property. The only way to access that area was through a small gate overgrown by bush at the front of the house. Now, just last Christmas, my sister and I were talking about the whole thing when she dropped a bomb. She had been messing around with the Ouija boards just before I had my encounter with the Demon Man.
Oh my gosh.
This was the first time she mentioned anything about an Ouija board. After the radio and the banging on her window, she decided to burn the Ouija board, and the strangeness apparently ceased. I'd love to hear a snake take on this whole thing. I wonder if the Ouija board served as some kind of vessel for this seemingly demonic and annoying phenomena to travel to us. What was the point of scaring my sister and I and stealing all our tools? Maybe it was making a craft powered by children's fear to return to its original dimension. Who freaking knows? Anyways, Snake Bros, I bid you farewell. Much love from Sydney, Australia. Snakes! From Harry. I'd be interested to know, was she properly closing out the sessions with the Ouija board? A lot of times, you can look at the whole Ouija thing as a type of ritual, and it has a close, right? But so often you hear these stories where they get it out, they open it up, they start up the session, they do the first thing, they all put their fingers on, and they're basically in the middle of a summoning ritual. And then they get a response, and everyone freaks out and runs off and doesn't end the ritual.
Go away, demon. Go back to whence you came.
Yes, right. Which is basically saying goodbye, thank you. You end. It's a simple thing, but you're supposed to close the ritual.
I was halfway out the door, and then they burned it down. Says the demon.
Right. But yes, I don't know. If you look at it that way, the Ouija board is a summoning ritual of a kind, a type of summoning and a kind of a version of automatic writing / channeling in a way, And it just depends. Like, there's no control, because usually the question is there anyone out there that wants to talk to us? Which is like open-ended for anything that hears it.
Yes.
Right.
Throw it away. Burn it.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't really want to mess with that. That's just that's my instinct. I don't want to mess with it.
Yeah. I do wonder how many, haunted houses are just places where Ouija sessions were not completed properly. But yeah, that's a great email. Thank you. All right, one more. Last one for today. This is from Tracy. Says, it's called Big Fan. Also, you guys are idiots. Snakes. I
hate this podcast. 5 stars.
Snakes. Idiots in the nicest way. Like how a little brother can be an idiot. Hey.
Oh, yeah.
At least one of you knows what I mean. What you guys do really well is jump into whatever topic you find interesting and honestly try to figure out what is going on. I think sometimes you can get a bit twisted mentally trying to keep an open mind and calling BS on some of the stranger ideas you are covering. BS degrees, maybe, instead of certificates of ignorance. Maybe that may be taken already. I work as a programmer with something of a speciality in probability and statistics and have made a long study of how to do both correctly. The single best book I have read about how to use data to update what you think is Probability Theory, The Logic of Science by E.T. Jaynes. It has a lot of heavy math, but the text is very readable if you want to skip over the equations. It covers the reasons why two honest people can come to different conclusions given the same data, why the more knowledgeable you are on a topic, the harder it is to change your opinion, how open-mindedness and stubbornness can both be false. The trick is to know how to correctly update your thought without ignoring or giving undue credence to the data at hand. Details of why Occam's razor, the simplest theory is more likely true, is a useful heuristic, but why because God made it that way is not much of a theory, even though it is often the simplest explanation. Plus much more relating very closely to the kinds of discussions you have about what to make of the stories you hear. On another topic, I'm Mormon, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and would be happy to go over some of the questions that seem to come up every so often. Some of the things that have come up have been a little distorted, like really, really a lot distorted. Finally, my daughter's boyfriend grew up in Vernal in Utah, quite near Skinwalker Ranch. His dad is a retired police officer who worked in the area for a long time. I asked him what his dad thought of the stories there. Quick answer, not much. Locals aren't much impressed. Take it for what you will. Anyways, thank you for the work you guys put into your shows. There's lots of good stuff in there. Thanks, and snakes from Tracy. Well, that's like a really nice way of saying we don't know how to think about stuff, which is probably true.
Still learning.
Yeah. And as for the Skinwalker Ranch thing, yeah, some locals do take it seriously, others don't. And, I've done this before with police officers, because you mentioned police officers, and I couldn't tell from reading it whether you asked the boyfriend whose dad was a police officer, or if you asked the dad of the boyfriend, meaning you asked the police officer directly. But either way, I found with police officers, it's like, I've done this before where I've asked them like, hey, does any weird stuff happen to you guys? And when they don't know you, they're like, nah. But if you get to know them a little bit, then they'll be like, okay, so there was this really weird thing that happened. And then they start telling you, but their immediate response is like, no, that's all bullshit. So I don't know. Not saying that this guy doesn't think that. I'm just telling you that's been my experience with asking police officers about weird stuff that they've encountered while on duty. And yeah, this stuff about open-mindedness, and what we like to do on this show is we're not trying to be open-minded or closed-minded. We don't really think about that, I don't think. I think what we're trying to do is just discuss all these ideas. And in some cases, you either have to take the stories at face value and discuss them that way, but we also all try to say, but you cannot take this story at face value and say it's complete crap. But there's multiple options, and because there's no way to pick one, other than personal preference, right?
It's kind of like the standard model situation where we're like, well, yeah, we all know that story.
Yeah, we already know that one. Yeah.
So it's like when we approach subjects that are not standard model, the point is not to sit in here and just trash it. And it's also not to sit in here and just be like, oh my God, I believe everything that I just heard.
Right. That's definitely not what's happening.
No, it's like, me personally, I'm not trying to be open-minded about anything. And a lot of, when I think something's BS, I think it's BS. But my purpose here is not to just be like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've expressed many times, like, certain subjects we get into, I'm just like, I don't know. And then of course, my thinking develops over time. Like I would think I would be going along one idea as an explanation, a possible explanation for ancient civilizations or ancient technology for a long time. And then, I hear another take on it that is like, oh, that's really compelling. Like I want to look into that more. And so, you change your ideas over time. I don't, and I've just become used to it. I'm so used to my ideas about things changing over time that I'm not so, I'm so knowledgeable about this subject now that, it's very hard for my ideas to change. I try to be like, well, yeah, I could find out things in the future that will completely change my ideas about this. That doesn't mean I'm just like wishy-washy.
Yeah.
I have the way I think about the world right now, but I'm definitely
change all the time.
Subject to change at any moment.
Yeah. given new data.
Yeah.
And the other thing is with the Occam's razor thing, like it's something that you can apply, but it isn't something that's always true. So it's useful as a least, in looking for the least hypothesis. But I think people take it a step too far, or some people take it many, many steps too far and say that Occam's razor is basically pointing you to which theory is correct. That's not what it says. And I think you're not saying that either. And the way you phrase it in your email, is a useful heuristic, but and that's what it is. And also simplest hypothesis means different things to a lot of people. To me, the least hypothesis, the idea of looking for something with the fewest assumptions, well, the next step you have to take in that is like, do I really know what all the assumptions are?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that there's gigantic stacks of assumptions beneath very simple things that they're saying when they're trying to use Occam's razor. And there isn't a single thing that you could talk about that doesn't have stacks of assumptions in it, that come from very fundamental and basic ways that people look at the universe that they just don't think of as assumptions. But because we don't understand the fundamental and basic ways the universe works, we have some laws, we have some ideas about them. I mean science has some ideas about these things, but where do those things come from? Nobody knows any of that either. So in other words, everything is full of assumptions. So actually finding the least hypothesis in a lot of the stuff we talk about is very difficult. And most people seem to, I shouldn't say they do this, but they seem to go with whatever I feel personally is most likely, which is not what Occam's razor is saying to do. In other words, they think that what you do is you look for things that seem likely, and that's a better hypothesis than something that seems unlikely to them. That's not what it's telling you to do. So I don't know. I'm interested in the philosophy of science and the methods of it. But it's also, to me, really important to try to remember that in the end, like we are always saying on this podcast, we don't know anything. There's you can get data, but you don't even know where that comes from. And it's being filtered through a whole bunch of stuff. So the reason these conversations are so much fun for us is because we know that we're going to step into these conversations with the desire to like explore the ideas, put out, we pose ridiculous ideas and then we'll trash them immediately after. Anyway, it's fun to do it. And it's not really about being open or closed-minded or whatever, I think. I mean, that probably happens sometimes, but it isn't the goal. My goal is to explore these mysteries and have fun with it.
Yeah.
I'm not really here to try to figure stuff out. I mean, that happens by talking about this stuff. That's part of it.
Yeah,
but,
and reading books and stories.
Yes,
and
of course. But
all that shit.
But the more
Interviewing people.
the more I study this kind of stuff, the more I think like, wow, I don't know what's going on at all.
Yeah.
It isn't. My goal here is not to be like, I've got the universe figured out, or I can completely discard this entire phenomena. That isn't what's happening. So, but yeah, thank you for the email. And sorry we get a lot of stuff about Mormonism wrong. I'm sure it happens.
Yeah.
We are like 99.8% wrong all the time.
This is stable on the podcast.
That's right. All right, guys. Thanks for all the emails. brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com if you want to tell us how wrong we are about Mormonism. Or anything else.
We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Back from the break, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, only ever discussing things we totally 100% believe. Where the sarcasm is very deep.
That's right. We don't talk about stuff on the show that we think is bullshit. So there's actually millions of things that we totally think are crap. You don't ever hear us talk about them because we don't bring them up on the show.
I don't think I've ever called anything total bullshit on the show.
No.
That's never happened.
No, that's not what we're here to do. We are here to 100% believe it all.
That's right.
Also, did we mention we have a cat in the studio with us?
Yes, Big Dude is here with us in studio.
That's right.
And he's actually being quiet. He's the deaf cat that doesn't know how loud he's meowing.
That's right. So yeah,
I'm not even sure that he knows he's meowing sometimes.
So yes, he has the third studio chair. He's behind us. All right, so back to the book.
He's being a good, big, old, fuzzy, warm guy.
Back to the Book of the Damned. So last week we were in the middle of tackling the parts. Let's see. We were talking about air lights and stones falling from the sky. I think the last thing I read was, we believe no more, we accept. So he says, little by little, the whirlwind and volcano explanations had to be abandoned. In other words, the whirlwind and volcano explanations of
this is back when people did not believe that stones fell from the sky.
Yes. The
Science.
explanation was that rock that looked like it was falling from the sky and that you saw it land and then there's a burnt rock there, that was just a rock that was already there that got hit by lightning.
I'm sure they were using statistical analysis to
Probably, yes.
bolster their theories.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'll stop. Stop doing that.
So little by little, the whirlwind and volcano explanations had to be abandoned. But so powerful was this exclusion hypnosis, sentence of damnation, or this attempt at positiveness, that far into our own times, some scientists, notably Professor Lawrence Smith and Sir Robert Ball, continued to hold out against all external origins, asserting that nothing could fall to this earth unless it had been cast up or whirled up from some other part of this Earth's surface. Meteorites, data of which were once of the damned, have been admitted, but the common impression of them is only a retreat of attempted exclusion, that only two kinds of substance fall from the sky, metallic and stony, that the metallic objects are of iron and nickel, and we shall see to start with that the virgins of science have fought and wept and screamed against external relations upon two grounds. There in the first place, or up from one part of this Earth's surface and down to another. This is a weird metaphor he's making here, I think. The virgins of science. As late as November 1902, in Nature Notes, volume 13, page 231, a member of the Selborne Society still argued that meteorites do not fall from the sky, that they are masses of iron upon the ground in the first place, that attract lightning, that the lightning is seen and is mistaken for a falling luminous object.
Wow.
So that was as late as 1902. And then the last thing he says in this chapter is butter and beef and blood and a stone with strange inscriptions on it, which are other things that have fallen from the sky that we're going to be getting into. Butter. So yeah, chapter 3 now. We'll begin with yellow substances that have fallen upon this earth. We'll see whether our data of them have a higher approximation to realness than have the dogmas of those who deny their existence, that is, as products from somewhere external to this earth. In mere impressionism, we take our stand. We have no positive tests nor standards. Realism in art, realism in science, they pass away. In 1859, the thing to do was to accept Darwinism. Now, many biologists are revolting and trying to conceive of something else. The thing to do was accept it in its day, but Darwinism, of course, was never proved. The fittest survive. What is meant by the fittest? Not the strongest, not the cleverest. Weakness and stupidity everywhere survive. There is no way of determining fitness except in that a thing does survive. Fitness, then, is only another name for survival. Darwinism basically says that survivors survive.
It's genius. Oh, shit. I love it.
As to yellow substances that have fallen upon this earth, the endeavor to exclude extra mundane origins is the dogma that all yellow rains and yellow snows are colored with pollen from this earth's pine trees. Simmons Meteorological Magazine is especially prudish in this respect and regards as highly improper all advances made by other explainers. Nevertheless, the Monthly Weather Review, May 1877, reports a golden yellow fall of February 27th in 1877 at Peclow, Germany, in which 4 kinds of organisms, not pollen, were the coloring matter. There were minute things shaped like arrows, coffee beans, horns, and discs. In the American Journal of Science, Volume 42, page 196, we are told of a yellow substance that fell by the bucketful upon a vessel one windless night in June in Pictou Harbor, Nova Scotia. The writer analyzed the substance, and it was found to, quote, give off nitrogen and ammonia and an animal odor, unquote. The chemist who analyzed the substance of Pictou sent a sample to the editor of the journal. The editor, of course, found pollen in it. My own acceptance is that there'd have to be some pollen in it, that nothing could very well fall through the air in June near the pine forests of Nova Scotia and escape all floating spores of pollen. But the editor does not say that this substance contained pollen. He disregards nitrogen, ammonia, and an animal odor and says that the substance was pollen. Journal of the Franklin Institute, volume 90, page 11. That upon the 14th of February in 1870, there fell at Genoa, Italy, according to Director Baccardo of the Technical Institute of Genoa and Professor Castellani, a yellow substance. But the microscope revealed numerous globules of cobalt blue, also corpuscles of a pearly color that resembled starch. You can see this in Nature, Volume 2, 166. Imbois says of a substance, reddish, varying to yellowish, that fell enormously and successively upon April 30th, May 1st, and May 2nd in France and Spain, that it carbonized and spread the odor of charred animal matter, that it was not pollen, and that in alcohol it left a residue of resinous material. Hundreds of thousands of tons of this matter must have fallen. And then he has the quote again, odor of charred animal matter. So it's all very absurd because even though we are told of a prodigious quantity of animal matter that fell from the sky in 3 days in France and Spain, we're not ready yet. That's all. Imbois says that this substance was not pollen. The vastness of the fall makes acceptable that it was not pollen. Still, the resinous residue does suggest pollen of pine trees, and we shall hear a great deal of a substance with a resinous residue that has fallen from the sky, and finally we shall divorce it from all suggestion of pollen. Now to Blackwood's Magazine, Volume 3, page 338, a yellow powder that fell at, in Calabria, March 14th, 1813, Some of this substance was collected by a professor of chemistry at Naples. It had an earthy, insipid taste and is described as unctuous. When heated, this matter turned brown, then black, then red. According to the Annals of Philosophy, Volume 11, 466, one of the components was a greenish yellow substance which, when dried, was found to be resinous. But concomitants of this fall, loud noises were heard in the sky, and then stones fell from the sky. Black rains and black snows. Rains as black as a deluge of ink and jet black snowflakes. Such a rain as that which fell in Ireland, May 14th, 1849, described in the Annals of Scientific Discovery in 1850 and the Annual Register in 1849. It fell upon a district of 400 square miles and was the color of ink and of a fetid odor and very disagreeable taste. The rain at Castlecommon in Ireland, April 30th, 1887. Thick, black rain. That's from the American Meteorological Journal, Volume 4. Black rain fell in Ireland, October 8th and 9th in 1907. It left, this is a quote, it left a most peculiar and disagreeable smell in the air. The orthodox explanation of this rain occurs in Nature, March 2nd, 1908. Cloud of soot that had come from South Wales, crossing the Irish Channel and all of Ireland. So, this black rain of Ireland in March, ascribed in Simmons' meteorological magazine to clouds of soot from the manufacturing towns of North England and South Scotland. Our intermediatist principle of pseudologic, or our principle of continuity, is, of course, that nothing is unique or individual, that all phenomena merge away into all other phenomena, that, for instance, suppose there should be vast celestial superoceanic or interplanetary vessels that come near this Earth and discharge volumes of smoke at times. We're only supposing such a thing as that now because conventionally we are beginning modestly and tentatively. But if it were so, there would necessarily be some phenomenon upon this Earth with which that phenomenon would merge. Extra mundane smoke and smoke from cities merge, or both would manifest in black precipitations and rain. So
It seems like if that was the case, that we would see a lot more black rain, like in the future.
yeah.
You know, as we go, you know, develop technology and more factories and things are being built, and
Yeah.
it should have been much more common.
Right. And I do think that some of that does happen. And
Yeah,
then
probably.
And then, like, you know, volcanic eruptions result in rains of stuff. But I think his point here is that the orthodox explanation it requires a cloud of soot coming from somewhere very far away and moving across large areas before raining black down
Right.
in some distant area. That's the first thing he's pointing out here. It has to cross the Irish Channel and all of Ireland.
Right.
But he says, so away from the great manufacturing centers, black rain in Switzerland, January 20th, 1911. Switzerland is so remote and so ill at ease is the conventional explanation here that nature says of this rain that in certain conditions of weather, snow may take on an appearance of blackness that is quite deceptive.
Wow.
That's their
It
explanation.
only looks black. It's not actually black.
Maybe so. Or at night, if dark enough, snow may look black. This is simply denying that a black rain fell in Switzerland in January 20th of 1911. Extreme remoteness from great manufacturing centers in La Nature 1888, Volume 2. That August 14th of 1888, there fell at the Cape of Good Hope a rain so black as to be described as a shower of ink. At the Cape of Good Hope, vast volumes of smoke from great manufacturing centers, as an explanation, cannot very acceptably merge with the explanation of extra-mundane origin, but smoke from a terrestrial volcano can, and that is the explanation, or the suggestion that is made in La Nature. Our opponents hold out for mundane origins of all black rains. Our method will be the presenting of diverse phenomena in agreement with the notion of some other origin. We take up not only black rains, but black rains and their accompanying phenomena. A correspondent to Knowledge, Volume 5, page 190, writes of a black rain that fell in the Clyde Valley, March 1st of 1884, of another black rain that fell 2 days later. According to the correspondent, a black rain had fallen in the Clyde Valley on March 20th, then again March 22, and according to Nature, a black rain fell at Marlsford in England, September 4th in 1873. More than 24 hours later, another black rain fell in the same small town. The black rains of Slains, according to Reverend James Rust. Black rain, I'm probably not saying that right, Slains. It's maybe a Scottish town. A black rain at Slains, January 14th, 1862. another at Karluk, 140 miles from Slains, May 1st, 1862, and then at Slains again, May 20th, 1862, and then again, October 28th, 1863. But after 2 of these showers, vast quantities of a substance sometimes described as pumice stone, or sometimes as slag, were washed upon the seacoast nearby. A chemist's opinion is given that this substance was slag. It was not a volcanic product, slag from smelting works. So we now have, for black rains, a concomitant that is irreconcilable with origin from factory chimneys. Whatever it may have been, the quantity of this substance was so enormous that, in Mr. Rust's opinion, to have produced so much of it would have required the united output of all the smelting works in the world. If slag it were, we accept that an artificial product has, in enormous quantities, fallen from the sky. If you don't think that such occurrences are damned by science, read Scottish Showers and see how impossible it was for the author to have this matter taken up by the scientific world. The first and second rains corresponded in time with ordinary ebullitions of Vesuvius. The third and fourth, according to Mr. Rust, corresponded with known volcanic activities upon this earth. So, I think what he's saying here is that along with this black rain, in certain circumstances, they had all this stuff that was being washed up that people thought maybe have been pumice, but when it was studied, they said, well, this isn't pumice. It's more like slag from smelting. And yet the quantities of it were so vast that it was difficult to understand where it came from. That it looks like artificial products.
Yeah.
But the guy's saying, like, if it is, it would require the united output of all the smelting works in the world to make this much of it.
Yeah, so I keep thinking of the idea of running into, like, a dust cloud. Mm-hmm. And that,
one in space.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Full of, iron.
Yep.
And so it's like nickel iron or whatever, and it's falling and it's basically being smelted on the way down.
Yeah.
But it's dust, so some of it forms clumps and the other just gets caught in.
Yeah, it can be kept up there and it forms clumps, or it was already smelted by very ancient interactions in space, and it's coming down.
Yeah.
As a cloud of soot plus giant chunks of slag.
Yeah.
And who knows how much of it, if this stuff is floating like pumice and washing ashore, well, how much of it just sank? Was too heavy to float.
Right. Didn't have bubbles trapped in it.
Right. Okay, so between October in 1863 and January of 1866, 4 more black rains fell at Slains in Scotland. The writer of this supplementary account tells us, with a better or more unscrupulous orthodoxy than Mr. Rust's, that of the 8 black rains, 5 coincided with eruptions of Vesuvius and 3 with eruptions of Etna. The fate of all explanation is to close one door only to have another fly wide open. I should say that my own notions upon this subject will be considered irrational, but at least my gregariousness is satisfied in associating here with the preposterous. Or this writer, and those who think in his rut, have to say that they can think of 4 discharges from one far distant volcano, passing over a great part of Europe, precipitating nowhere else, and discharging precisely over one small northern parish. But also of 3 other discharges from another far distant volcano, showing the same precise preference, if not marksmanship, for one small parish in Scotland. So that, I think, that's where he gets to the second point, right? Because first, the explanation that we're tackling is it's soot from factories in a distant, maybe not quite as distant. It's a city that's far away. It's got coal factories and stuff. And so that soot goes up in the air, and then it just happens to rain multiple times of that black stuff from that soot from that distant city on this same place a couple of times. But the other ones are basically, the explanation is 2 different volcanoes in very different places on the planet, are the reason for like 8 different rains on this one town.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know what makes people make these explanations. You see black rain in this one place multiple times. You're like, well, 4 of these could be explained because there was an eruption of Vesuvius going on, and it just happened to rain in this same town 4 times from that and kind of nowhere else. But the other 3 times it rained black rain in this same town, there was no Vesuvius eruption. But let's see, somewhere else there was a volcano eruption, so that must be the explanation for these.
Yeah, it's the desire to have an answer.
Yeah, that's why I love that he says this is black rain showing marksmanship.
But I mean, I understand the desire to have an answer perfectly.
Yeah.
I want one, but
yeah.
I don't know.
And it's I've seen stuff like this, and it's like, I mean, Fort is reading these from the journals, so
right.
It's not like he's reading articles written by science communicators and journalists. He's reading reports from the scientists.
Right.
So on the one hand, I'd say, well, this is, sometimes this can be a factor of how the journalists report what the scientists are telling them. And when you find out what the scientists are saying, they're usually saying, well, this could be it. This is a possible explanation. And then the journalists are like, yeah, so these volcanoes are the explanation. That's what science says.
Well, the other option is that there were scientists making observations in this town. And that's where the observations came, but there weren't scientists everywhere else where the black rains were falling to make the observations. So you don't have enough data.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I guess you would kind of expect there to be a line that would be traceable in some way of black rains, maybe not a straight line. And obviously it isn't going to rain everywhere.
Yeah, but if it's like it rains a little bit in the mountains and nobody's there.
Right.
And it's like, that's the point. It's like coming up with an answer is difficult because you just don't have enough data.
You don't have enough data. Yeah.
Accepting the answer it's like the same problem, right? It's like, well, I can accept that answer. That must be it. And then you move on without having enough data to really bolster that, that conclusion.
Yeah.
Then that leads you to come up with the same wrong answer or possibly wrong answer for the next time it happens.
Yeah, or someone else, because they're like, well, this was the answer
that was
before by some other guy.
that volcano, so this must have been that one.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So in Tim's yearbook, 1851, page 270, there is an account of, quote, a sort of rumbling as of wagons heard for upward of an hour without ceasing, unquote. So this reminds me of, we've tackled this subject a few times on the podcast, the weird sounds from the sky that people hear that seem to be maybe industrial. A lot of them are products of industrial noises that are being heard from great distances. Some of the explanations is like, well, that was a train that was 200 miles away, which is possible. There can be, acoustics can do weird things, but that's what these parts remind me of. And it's interesting when, you get a rain of weird stuff, stones or slag or whatever also falls from the sky. And there's also weird rumblings and booming sounds. Mm-hmm. That does sound like possible bolides or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So they heard a rumbling as of wagons, heard upward for an hour without ceasing. July 16th, 1850, Bolwick Rectory in Northampton in England. On the 19th, a black rain fell. So July 16th, they hear the noise, and then on the 19th, the rain falls. In Nature, a correspondent writes of an intense darkness at Preston in England, April 26, 1884, page 32. Another correspondent writes of a black rain at Crowle, near Worcester. April 26th, it looks like Worcester, but it's probably Worcester. April 26th, that a week later, or May 3rd, it had fallen again. Another account of black rain upon the 28th of April, so 2 days later, near Church Shetton, so intense that the following day, brooks were still dyed with it.
Wow.
According to 4 accounts by correspondents to Nature, there were earthquakes in England at this time. So again, these booming noises in the sky can feel like earthquakes. So I wonder if they were actual earthquakes or everything was shaking because you're getting an explosion in the sky above you.
I wonder if also it could be like like an eruption, but from under the ocean that just like puts up this giant bubble of gas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's hot, so it comes out and just goes up, rises up from convection and then ends up raining.
Yep. Or the Black Rain of Canada, November 9th, 1819. This time it is orthodoxy to attribute the black precipitate to smoke of forest fires south of the Ohio River. Zurcher, Meteors, page 238, that this black rain was accompanied by shocks like those of an earthquake. The Edinburgh Philosophical Journal says that the earthquakes had occurred at the climax of intense darkness and the fall of black rain. So now you have intense darkness, falls of black rain, and earthquakes at the same time. Red rains, orthodoxy, sand blown by the Sirocco from the Sahara to Europe. I think, let's see, Sirocco, is that Sirocco is a hot wind, often dusty or rainy, blowing from North Africa across the Mediterranean to southern Europe. Especially in the earthquake regions of Europe, there have been many falls of red substance, usually but not always precipitated in rain. Upon many occasions, these substances have been, quote, absolutely identified, unquote, as sand from the Sahara. When I first took this matter up, I came across assurance after assurance, so positive to this effect that, had I not been an intermediatist, I'd have looked no further. Samples collected from a rain at Genoa. Samples of sand forwarded from the Sahara. Absolute agreement, some writers said. Same color, same particles of quartz, even the same shells of diatoms mixed in. Then the chemical analysis, not a disagreement worth mentioning. But our intermediatist means of expression will be that with proper exclusions, after the scientific or theological method, anything can be identified with anything else, if all things are only different expressions of an underlying oneness. To many minds, there's rest and there's satisfaction in that expression, absolutely identified. So I think he's saying what you're talking about, like looking for the answers, like, and then you get one, you're like, okay, mystery solved.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, what else can we do, right? I mean, I understand the direction he's coming from, but say a person who does study diatoms and they've dug up and studied diatoms from all these different layers of sediment in rivers versus ocean sediments versus lakes, and they have all these different, like, okay, I mean, you got to make correlations somewhere to figure stuff out. So it's like, if they compare them together and they're like, all these things match. Sure, there's probably some observations they didn't make that may not have matched, or maybe they had some bias, and it's like, well, it's insignificant, these things that don't match, because there could be a lot of other things in the Saharan desert sand that wasn't in the sample that they got.
Right. Yeah.
It's like you have to have limits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
And I agree. I think so. And maybe I know this because I've read ahead, but what he's talking about here is that every red rain is explained this way.
Oh.
And we're about to tackle a bunch that can't be.
Don't be. Yeah, I gotcha.
But what? And he acknowledges, like, sure, some red rains are basically rain with Sahara material in it that gives it this ochre color or yellowish color or orange color, right? And you can see Sahara material in the rain. But he goes through and he's like, so I'm diving into the studies, and we'll get to it, where he's like, well, what they basically did was ignore everything that didn't match the Sahara stuff and say, well, look, there's diatoms and sand bits from the Sahara, so it must be Sahara stuff.
The Sahara stuff was in there.
Yeah, just like the pollen, right? It's like, yes, you can't rain in June near the pine forests of Nova Scotia and not get pollen in it. But what they did was they looked and they're like, well, I found pollen in there. That explains the yellow color. Bam, ignore all the rest of the stuff, including the fact that it smelled like rotting meat.
Yeah.
But yes, what you're saying is also correct. You have to have limits.
Because
you don't have an infinite amount of time to study this
That's
stuff.
right. And in physics, there's always strange stuff, right? Like they're doing experiments. There's always strangeness. And it's like some of it you can, this is why you have, what is it called? Tolerances on things. It's within the margin of error.
Yeah.
So there's always weird things. And so in some cases, this is where confirmation bias is a problem, because you can disregard the oddities because they're so insignificant that you can say, well, I can still base this this data on or use this data as a
it fits into the standard model of physics.
As a standard to then go on for further things. But then that can be abused.
Yeah,
where you can throw out so much stuff that doesn't fit because you're wanting to get to a certain conclusion.
Right.
But it's always expected that you're gonna have a margin of error. You're gonna have strange things that appear that are perhaps fairly insignificant to the idea or to the goal. So I don't know. There's no end to it.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting the way he tackles this, because I agree. And I think he does point out, hey, it's clearly there's Sahara stuff in these. And we know that there's big sandstorms in the Sahara and it blows this stuff across Europe. It does happen. All right, we back at break time. I think it's...
Yeah, we should take a break.
Yeah, we should take a break. And we will come back.
Right.
More Book of the Damned.
Let old big dude back in.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And we are going through Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. And what are we on? Chapter 3? Back up here. Yes, chapter 3. So, right at the break, we were talking about, the problem of wanting to find an answer versus like discarding too much data in order to have your answer. Or the problem of like answers carrying on through the scientific discussion because of assumptions made previously. And
and a lot of times good scientists will find a probable answer.
Yeah.
And that becomes accepted in the community.
Yes.
And then moving forward, people who didn't do the research and didn't do the experiments to come up with the probable answer don't know the bits and pieces of data that didn't
fit that probable answer.
That probable answer. And they just assume, okay, that was a probable answer. And now we're going to build off of that.
Yeah.
That's why Feynman was always about like, hey, if you're working on some research project, redo all of the other experiments.
Do the basic experiments.
That are the building blocks of your theory.
Yeah.
Like your theory starts based on the results of other people's experiments.
Right.
You need to redo all of those.
Yeah. Which again,
that's a lot of time
have
and
diminishing
effort.
returns, right?
Yes.
Well, maybe not. There may not be diminishing returns for that, but it's a matter of time and money.
Money and all that. So it's understandable.
Yeah.
That this happens. This is one of the issues with science. It's not any one person's fault. It's just there's a lot of factors, but it's just something to realize that this happens.
Yeah, and I think that's that's kind of what the idea is here with, the concept of Fortean science is, in a way, going back to, like Feynman was saying, do all the experiments from the start. But also, let's look at the fringe data, the stuff that doesn't get accepted, the stuff that isn't part of the, of the stacks of accepted explanations. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes if you go back and you look at all that fringe data and you kind of try to sort of scrape it all together like Ford has done here, you can come up with very different ideas about what's going on. And I love that he starts, that he has this section in there earlier about the problem with meteorites. We see the process happening. Now, in science's defense, this exclusion was overcome. The problem of rocks don't fall from the sky. But what's interesting is that he's showing you, he's saying, here's an example where there was plenty of time where scientists were like, rocks don't fall from the sky, and if one seemed to, it was already there.
Yeah.
Now we know that that's wrong. That's not the correct way to look at it. But let's look at all these other circumstances where science hasn't yet moved forward from their explanations of whirlwinds picked this up and dropped it somewhere else.
And I have to point this out. Another interesting thing about this is that a lot of, I don't know if it's Thunderbolt's project, Electric Universe, whatever. A lot of these people that follow those ideas think that rocks don't fall from space and it's all lightning.
Yeah.
So it's that's interesting.
Hey,
that's interesting.
I can imagine.
I can imagine that sometimes it is. Right. But the idea that it's going to the extreme to say that, no, none of this is
rocks from
geological, normal geological processes or floods or actual rocks that fall from space, but it's all lightning. And, it's it's probably a combination.
Yes, that's right.
Lay it on me.
So to many minds, there's rest and there's satisfaction in that expression, absolutely identified. Absoluteness, or the illusion of it, the universal quest. If chemists had identified substances that have fallen in Europe as sand from African deserts, swept up in African whirlwinds, that's assuasive to all the irritations that occur to those cloistered minds that must repose in the concept of a smug, isolated little world, free from contact with cosmic wickedness, safe from stellar guile, undisturbed by interplanetary prowlings and invasions. The only trouble is that a chemist's analysis, which seems so final and authoritative to some minds, is no more nearly absolute than is identification by a child or description by an imbecile. Woo! That's pretty harsh right there. I take some of that back.
I'm going to delete that part.
I accept that the approximation is higher. November 12th and 13th, 1902 occurred the greatest fall of matter in the history of Australia. Upon the 14th of November, it, quote, rained mud, unquote, in Tasmania. Ooh. It was, of course, attributed to Australian whirlwinds, but, according to the Monthly Weather Review, there was a haze all the way to the Philippines, also as far as Hong Kong. It may be that this phenomenon had no especial relation with the even more tremendous fall of matter that occurred in Europe on February of 1903. So, yeah.
Wow, we're getting close to 1908 here.
Mm-hmm. To November 12th and 13th of 1902, and then February 1903. So I guess he's pointing out that these are relatively close to each other. For several days, the south of England was a dumping ground from somewhere. If you'd like to have a chemist's opinion, even though it's only a chemist's opinion, see the report of the meeting of the Royal Chemical Society, April 2nd of 1903. Mr. E.G. Clayton read a paper upon some of the substance that had fallen from the sky collected by him. The Sahara explanation applies mostly to falls that occur in southern Europe. Farther away, the conventionalists are a little uneasy. For instance, the editor of the Monthly Weather Review says of a red rain that fell near the coast of Newfoundland early in 1890, it would be very remarkable if this was Sahara dust. Mr. Clayton said that the matter examined by him was, quote, merely wind-borne dust from the roads and lanes of Wessex, unquote. This opinion is typical of all scientific opinion, or theological opinion, or feminine opinion.
What?
It's all very well except for what it disregards. All right, Fort. The most charitable thing I can think of, because I think it gives us a broader tone to relieve our malices with occasional charities, is that Mr. Clayton had not heard of the astonishing extent of this fall. It had covered the Canary Islands on the 19th, for instance. I think myself that in 1903 we passed through the remains of a powdered world. See,
Wow, that's cool.
yeah, this is interesting. Left over from an ancient interplanetary dispute, perhaps, brooding in space like a red resentment ever since. Or, like every other opinion, the notion of dust from Wessex turns into a provincial thing when we look it over. So, in other words, what he's saying here is there was this vast fall of material, and this guy is saying it came from dusty roads in a certain part of England. You know. As to opinions or pronouncements, I should say, because they always have such an authoritative air of other chemists, there is an analysis in Nature giving water and organic matter at 9.08%. It's that carrying out of fractions that's so convincing. The substance is identified as sand from the Sahara. But the vastness of this fall. In Nature, we are told that it had occurred in Ireland too. The Sahara, of course, because prior to February 19th, there had been dust storms in the Sahara, disregarding that in that great region, there's always, in some part of it, a dust storm. However, just at present, it does look reasonable that dust had come from Africa via the Canaries. The great difficulty that authoritativeness has to contend with is some other authoritativeness. When an infallibility clashes with a pontification, they explain. Nature, March 5th, 1903. Another analysis, 36% organic matter. So such disagreements don't look very well, because they're going back 9.08% organic matter. So in Nature, one of the differing chemists explains. He says that his analysis was of muddy rain, and the other was of sediment of rain.
So he collected the rain itself, and the other one got
the dried material, or dried it out afterwards or something. So we're quite ready to accept excuses from the Most High. Though
it sounds to me like one of them actually had something that collected the rain itself, and the other one picked up sediment from the ground.
Yes.
Caused by the rain.
Yes. Right. That's what I thought. It was either that or one of the people evaporated the rain and then tested the material left to see what was in it. Either way, you get the same result.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
The percentages of the materials
of the sediment,
and the
which
other
was
one
either picked up on the ground of
the total of the water
and the materials. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So we're quite ready to accept excuses from the Most High, though I do wonder whether we're quite so damned as we were if we find ourselves in a gracious and tolerant mood towards the powers that condemn. But the tax that now comes upon our good manners and unwillingness to be too severe, in Nature, Volume 68. Another chemist, he says that it was 23.49% water and organic matter. He identifies this matter as sand from an African desert, but after deducting organic matter. But you or I could be identified as sand from an African desert after deducting all that there is to us except for the sand. Why we cannot accept that this fall was of sand from the Sahara, omitting the obvious objection that in most parts of the Sahara it is not red at all, but usually described as dazzlingly white. So, the Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, that up until the 27th of February, this fall had continued in Belgium and Holland, Germany, and Austria, that in some instances it was not sand, or that almost all the matter was organic, that a vessel had reported the fall as occurring in the Atlantic Ocean midway between Southampton and Barbados. The calculation is given that Barbados. Yeah, you're right. The calculation is given that in England alone, 10 million tons of the material had fallen.
Oh, my God.
It had fallen in Switzerland in March. It had fallen in Russia. Not only had a vast quantity of matter fallen several months before in Australia, but it was at this time falling in Australia
Upside down.
enormously. Red mud 50 tons per square mile. So now remember the Wessex explanation, or that every explanation is a Wessex explanation. By that I mean an attempt to interpret the enormous in terms of the minute. But that nothing can be finally explained because by capital T truth we mean the capital U universal. And that even if we could think as wide as universality, that would not be requital to the cosmic quest, which is not for truth, but for the local that is true. Not to universalize the local, but to localize the universal, or to give to a cosmic cloud absolute interpretations in terms of the little dusty roads and lanes of Wessex. Our intermediatist concept is that because of the continuity of all things, which are not separate, positive, or real things, all pseudo things partake of the underlying, or are only different expressions, degrees, or aspects of the underlying, so then that a sample from somewhere in anything must correspond with a sample from somewhere in anything else. That by due care in selection and disregard for everything else, or the scientific and theological method, the substance that fell February 1903 could be identified with anything, or with some part or aspect of anything that could be conceived of. With sand from the Sahara, sand from a barrel of sugar, or dust of your great-great-great-grandfather. Different samples are described and listed in the Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, or we'll see whether my notion that a chemist could have identified some of these samples as from anywhere conceivable is extreme or not. Similar to brick dust, we find in one place. Buff or light brown in another place. Chocolate-colored and silky to the touch and slightly iridescent in another. Gray in another. Red rust color in another. Reddish raindrops and gray sand in another. Dirty gray, quite red, yellow-brown with a tinge of pink, and deep yellow clay color. These are all descriptions of supposedly the same falls of stuff. In nature, it is described as of a peculiar yellowish cast in one place, reddish somewhere else, and salmon-colored in another place. So the attempt at realness, or to state a real and unmodified fact here, is the statement. All red rains are colored by sands from the Sahara Desert. My own impositivist acceptances are that some red rains are colored by sands from the Sahara Desert, some by sands from other terrestrial sources, some by sands from other worlds or from their deserts, also from aerial regions too indefinite or amorphous to be thought of as worlds or planets, that no supposititious whirlwind can account for the hundreds of millions of tons of material that fell on Australia, Pacific Ocean, and Atlantic Ocean, and Europe in 1902 and 1903. A whirlwind that could do that would not be supposititious.
Well, that's cool. So I can see, like, one way to look at this is like, because there are dust storms all the time in the Sahara, and those dust storms throw up all this dust that's blowing all over the world all the time, pretty much.
Yeah.
That any rain, you could go and do an analysis and say, oh, it's sand from the Sahara.
Yes. That's right.
So even if you did run through another dust cloud that was not from the Sahara,
You would still
find the sands from the Sahara in that dust cloud, in the rain, in the sediments in the rain.
That's right.
And so the percentages, is like, well, yeah, okay, if you disregard the organic material or you disregard the materials that don't match the dust from the Sahara, you can...
I also like that he just, offhandedly points out that desert is white, not red.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean...
from Google Earth, it does not look white. I mean, there are a lot of light colors, but there's a lot of red in that desert.
Yeah.
And he didn't have Google Earth.
Yeah, that's right.
There is lots of red in there.
Yeah. That's right. And it's, like red dust is not a problem to come from a desert. Like it will. Yeah. But yeah, most of it's like a eggshell or yellowish color. It's not, you're right, there are big red sections.
Yeah.
But the dunes are usually not red, I think. The red is like more the sandstone stuff. I don't know. Still, it's all interesting, and you're right. And like, I love how there's like all this organic material, and you're like, wait, didn't this come from a desert? Are we talking about Sahara sand? And there's, but the organic material doesn't have to come from that windstorm. Like that could just like how, again, you wonder, you find 20-something% organic material in there. Well, is that just pollen from the nearby area? What does that mean?
Man, excuse the clearing of the throat. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something in the air.
It's happening to me
Could be
too.
Saharan dust. Actually, no. My sinuses and everything were the most clear that I can remember the whole time we were in Egypt.
Yeah, that's right.
And then as soon as we got back to Texas, I was like,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Whatever allergens we're allergic to here, they're not there. And we didn't have enough
great.
time to get allergic to the stuff there, so it wasn't bad.
But I love the idea of the dust from deserts of other worlds, even some that are so amorphous, like they just like
Yeah, it's just molecular clouds in space.
of stuff that could have been from deserts of worlds long past.
Oh, yeah.
Have been destroyed. It's
Yeah.
just like, wow, that is cool.
Yeah. So there have been red rains that, in the Middle Ages, were called rains of blood. Such rains terrified many persons and were so unsettling to large populations that science, capital S, science, in its sociologic relations has sought by Mrs. Eddy's method to remove an evil. That rains of blood do not exist. That rains so-called are only of water colored by sand from the Sahara Desert. My own acceptance is that such assurances, whether fictitious or not, whether the Sahara is a dazzling white desert or not, have wrought such good effects in a sociologic sense, even though prostitutional in the positive sense, that in the sociological sense they were well justified. But that we've gone on, that this is the 20th century, that most of us have grown up so that such soporific? I think that's how you say that. Of the past are no longer necessary. That if gushes of blood should fall from the sky upon New York City, business would go on as usual. I don't know if that's true. There was a red rain in the Mediterranean region, March 6th, 1888. 12 days later, it fell again. Whatever this substance may have been, when burned, the odor of animal matter from it was strong and persistent. November 2nd, 1819, a week before the Black Rain and Earthquake of Canada, there fell at Blankenberge in Holland, a red rain. As to sand, two chemists concentrated 144 ounces of the rain to 4 ounces, and no precipitate fell. But the color was so marked that, had there been sand, it would have been deposited if the substance had been diluted instead of concentrated. Experiments were made, and various reagents did cast precipitates, but other than sand. The chemists concluded that the rainwater contained muriate of cobalt, which is not very enlightening. That could be said of many substances carried in vessels upon the Atlantic Ocean. Whatever it may have been, its color is said to have been red-violet. So did you catch that the chemistry there? They're trying to see what precipitates out. Mm-hmm. And none of it was sand stuff. Muriate of cobalt. Like, is that like an acid?
No idea.
Muriatic?
I can look it up.
Okay, yeah. Brine. Muriate. So yeah, they used various reagents. These did cast precipitates, but none of those were sand. So they concluded that it contained, basically, I think they're saying an acid of cobalt or a salt of cobalt.
That may be what it is. I can't find that exact.
Yeah, I think
definition.
muriate is an old term.
Let me look it up. Just that. Definition.
Should I keep reading while you're doing that? Or
Same as chlorid. a salt of muriatic hydrochloric acid. A
Okay.
chloride, that's muriate.
Okay.
So muriate of cobalt is I guess a muriatic,
Like cobalt dissolved in an acid.
maybe.
We'll
Damn
hear
it,
from,
where's
we'll
the
hear
watcher
from the
when we need
chemists.
him?
Yeah. So something that fell with dust said to have been meteoric. March 9th, 10th, 11th of 1872, described in the Chemical News as a peculiar substance, consisted of red iron ochre, carbonate of lime, and organic matter. Then there was orange red hail, March 14th, 1873, in Tuscany. Rain of lavender-colored substance in France. And according to Professor Schwedoff, there fell in Russia, June 14th, 1880, red hailstones and blue hailstones and gray hailstones. Nature, a correspondent, writes that he had been told by a resident of a small town in Venezuela that there, in April 17th, 1886, had fallen hailstones, some red, some blue, and some whitish. The informant said to have been one unlikely ever to have heard of the Russian phenomenon, and he was described as an honest and plain countryman. Nature, July 5th, 1877, quotes a Roman correspondent to the London Times who sent a translation from an Italian newspaper that a red rain had fallen in Italy, June 23rd, 1877, containing, quote, microscopically small particles of sand, unquote. But the English correspondent, from a land where terrifying red rains are uncommon, does not feel this necessity. He writes, I am by no means satisfied that the rain was of sand and water. His observations are that drops of this rain left stains, quote, such as sandy water could not leave, unquote. He notes that when the water evaporated, no sand was left behind. Then, in December 13th, 1887, there fell in China a substance like blood, somewhat coagulated. And then a thick, viscous red matter fell at Ulm in 1812. So now we have a datum with a factor that has been foreshadowed, which will recur and recur and recur throughout this book. It is a factor that makes for speculation so revolutionary that will have to be reinforced many times before we can take it into full acceptance. From the Yearbook of Facts, 1861. A quotation from a letter from Professor Campini, that upon December 28th, 1860, at about 7 a.m. in the northwestern part of Siena, a reddish rain fell copiously for 2 hours. And then a second red shower fell at 11 o'clock. And 3 days later, it fell again. And the next day, another red rain fell, still more extraordinarily. Each fall occurred in exactly the same quarter of town.
What?
This is where you get the marksmanship.
That is strange. It's aliens. It's exhaust from their spaceships, and they're just coming down to check that town.
It does merge into that. Like later on, there's stuff in here where I'm like, this sounds like angel hair.
Oh yeah. Real quick, just going back to this, it says that the muriate or whatever is the same as a chlorid, which I guess could be chloride.
Chloride.
So cobalt chloride is an inorganic compound of cobalt and chlorine.
Oh, okay.
And it can be anhydrous, which is like a sort of a blue crystalline solid. The dihydrate is purple and the hexahydrate is pink.
Ah. Okay. All right. Chapter 4. It is in the records of the French Academy that, upon March 17th, 1669, in a town whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce, fell a reddish substance that was thick, viscous, and putrid. American Journal of Science. There is a story of a highly unpleasant substance that had fallen from the sky in Wilson County in Tennessee. We read that Dr. Troost visited the place and investigated. Later, we're going to investigate some investigations, but never mind that now. Dr. Troost reported that the substance was clear blood and portions of flesh scattered over tobacco fields. He argued that a whirlwind may have taken an animal up from one place, mauled it, and precipitated its remains somewhere else.
Man.
On the 13th of August in
This just reminds me of like cattle mutilations and stuff. Like
yeah. The other thing
all the blood is gone.
Right.
And,
the other thing I thought of is
random
Dr.
body parts.
Troost is covering up for a murder.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know the extent of the fall. It says blood and portions of flesh scattered upon tobacco fields. That seems like a pretty wide area, too. Anyway. Upon 13th of August, 1819, something had fallen from the sky at Amherst in Massachusetts. It had been examined and described by Professor Graves, formerly a lecturer at Dartmouth. It was an object that had upon it a nap, similar to that of milled cloth. Upon removing this nap, a buff-colored, pulpy substance was found. It had an offensive odor and, upon exposure to the air, turned a vivid red. This thing was said to have fallen with a brilliant light. So, right. So they see what basically looks like a meteor. And when they get there, it looks like it is like some kind of meat, putrid smelling meat that has a cloth cover over it. What is this?
That is weird.
In the American Journal of Science, you find Professor Graves' account communicated by Professor Dewey. That upon the evening of August 13th, 1819, a light was seen in Amherst, a falling object, and a sound as if of an explosion. In the home of Professor Dewey, this light was reflected upon a wall of a room in which were several members of his family. The next morning, in Professor Dewey's front yard, in what is said to have been the only position from which the light that had been seen in the room the night before could have been reflected, was found a substance, quote, unlike anything before observed by anyone who saw it, unquote. It was a bowl-shaped object, about 8 inches in diameter and 1 inch thick, bright, buff-colored, and having upon it a fine nap, which I assume means like a weave, N-A-P.
Okay.
Upon removing this covering, I think they're talking about it like it's a cloth, right? Upon removing this covering, a buff-colored pulpy substance of the consistency of soft soap was found, and it was of an offensive...
A soft or fuzzy surface on fabric or leather.
Okay.
Doesn't say warm. It's not a warm and fuzzy surface.
It's just fuzzy and soft.
Soft and fuzzy.
Okay. Yeah, so they said it was buff-colored pulpy, the consistency of soft soap, and was found of an offensive and suffocating smell. A few minutes of exposure to the air changed the buff color to, quote, a livid color resembling venous blood or venous. It absorbed moisture quickly from the air and liquefied. For some of the chemical reactions, see the journal. London Times, April 19th, 1836. A fall of fish that had occurred in the neighborhood of Allahabad in India. It is said that the fish were of the chalwa species, about a span in length and a seer in weight. You know. Is that a joke? A span in length? I think a span is like across the fingers. Right. I don't know what a seer is. S-E-E-R in weight. And they were dead and dry.
A span unit. Okay, let's see. Span is the distance measured by the human hand from the tip of the thumb to the tip of the little finger.
Okay, yeah, so it's across the fingers.
Yeah,
like
when your
when
hand
you
is
spread your hand out.
Spread out. Yeah.
Okay.
What was the other one? A seer.
A seer. S-E-E-R.
What was the context?
In weight.
Weight. A metric seer, 74.22 grams, approximately 2.618 ounces. Wait. Yeah, okay. I was thinking. Anyway, yeah, 2.5 ounces.
And they were dead and dry, it says. So it rains fish that were desiccated.
Weird.
So what would that be? You'd say basically They weighed a couple of ounces, and they were maybe 8 inches across.
Yeah. Like little cigar minnows or
Yeah.
something.
So he says, I incline myself to the acceptance that they were not fish, but slender fish-shaped objects of the same substance as that which fell at Amherst. It is said that whatever they were, they could not be eaten. And in the pan, it says they turned into blood.
So they look like fish, but
He doesn't think they were actually
might have
fish.
just been like
Fish-shaped, like weird cigar-shaped things
Yeah.
with pointy ends. Because, yeah, you cook a fish, it doesn't turn into blood in the pan.
well.
But it does.
There are some fish like
Oh, you mean they turn into paste when you try to
they're
cook them?
just
Yeah.
the ladyfish or what's the other word for it? Skipjack. Like you try to cook that meat and it just basically melts into this gross paste. It's not bloody,
Right,
though.
it's white,
I mean,
right? Yeah.
it's like this gray, pasty color. I tried it. It's
gross.
We were trying to live. We were trying to survive.
That's right,
On the
yeah.
beach, it just didn't work. It was no good. But yeah, so I can imagine that that maybe some fish could be bloody, like turn reddish.
It's
color.
just interesting that they were dead and desiccated, and then when they try to cook them, it turns into this red liquid shit.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
weird. So he says in the American...
Who tried to cook that?
I know. Let's cook these fish that fell out of the sky that are already dead and desiccated. In the American Journal of Science, it occurs the inevitable damnation of the Amherst object. Professor Edward Hitchcock went to live in Amherst. He said that years later, another object, like the one said to have fallen in 1819, had been found at, quote, nearly the same place, unquote. Professor Hitchcock was invited by Professor Graves to examine it. Exactly like the first one. Corresponded in size and color and consistency. The chemic reactions were the same. Professor Hitchcock recognized it in a moment. It was a gelatinous fungus. He did not satisfy himself as to just the exact species it belonged to, but he predicted that similar fungi might spring up within 24 hours. But before the evening, 2 others sprang up. Or we've arrived at one of the oldest of the exclusionists' conventions, or Nostoc. So this is another term he brings up, and I think Nostoc is the description I get is a microorganism composed of beaded filaments that aggregate to form a gelatinous mass growing in water in damp places and able to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere.
Dude, that's interesting because we have something like that. It's like this it's kind of a brownish green, and you'll see it, say, like on the tops of hills where the grass is a little sparse and it's rocky
Yeah.
and there's not deep soil. When you get just enough rain, there's like this brownish gelatinous stuff that forms all over the ground.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
Yes, that's what he's talking about. Yeah. Nostoc is how he spells it here.
Okay. Anyway, keep going.
So we shall have many data of gelatinous substance said to have fallen from the sky. Almost always the exclusionists argue that it was only nostoc, an algae, or in some respect, a fungus growth. The rival contention is spawn of frogs or fishes, so I guess that would mean fish or frog eggs. Is that what that's talking about? These two conventions have made a strong combination. In instances where testimony was not convincing that gelatinous matter had been seen to fall, it was said that the gelatinous substance was nostoc and had been up on the ground in the first place. When the testimony was too good that it had fallen, it was said to be spawn that had been carried from one place to another in a whirlwind. So if no one really could, it couldn't be confirmed that it fell from the sky, it was just stuff that grew on the ground. If it could be confirmed that it fell from the sky, it's fish eggs or frog eggs. Upon March 3rd, 1876, at Olympian Springs, Bath County in Kentucky, flakes of a
We need to take a break.
Oh, are we at the end of the show?
Oh, yeah. Wait. Never mind. Just finish what you're doing. We are.
Okay.
I forgot. It's a 3-segment show.
It's been 3 segments, yeah, with all these emails. Okay, yeah, so flakes of a substance that looked like beef fell from the sky. and, quote, from a clear sky, unquote. So we'd like to emphasize that it was said that nothing but this falling substance was visible in the sky. It fell in flakes of various sizes, some 2 inches square, 1, 3, or 4 inches square. The flake formation is interesting. Later, we shall think of it as signifying pressure somewhere. It was a thick shower on the ground, on trees, on fences, but narrowly localized upon a strip of land about 100 yards long and 50 yards wide. For the first account, you can see the Scientific American, volume 34, page 197, and the New York Times, March 10th, 1876. Something that looked like beef, one flake of it the size of a square envelope. If we think of how hard the exclusionists have fought to reject the coming of ordinary-looking dust from this Earth's externality, we can sympathize with them in this sensational instance, perhaps. Newspaper correspondents wrote broadcast, and witnesses were quoted, and this time there is no mention of a hoax, and except by one scientist, there is no denial that the fall did take place. Scientific American Supplement, Volume 2. This substance reported from Kentucky had been examined by Leopold Brandeis. Quote, at last we have a proper explanation of this much talked of phenomenon, unquote. It has been comparatively easy to identify the substance and to fix its status. The Kentucky wonder is no more or less than nostoc.
I much prefer beef flakes. Breakfast of champions. Beef flakes and Worcestershire sauce.
Worcestershire. Or that it had not fallen, that it had been upon the ground in the first place and had swollen in the rain, and attracting attention by greatly increased volume had been supposed by unscientific observers to have fallen in rain. But of course, what rain, we don't know, because they fell out of a clear sky. Also, it is spoken of as dried several times. This is one of the most important of the details. The New York Times, March 12th, 1876, that the substance has been examined and analyzed by Professor Smith, according to whom it gave every indication of being the dried spawn of some reptile, doubtless of the frog, or up from one place and down in another. As to dried, that may refer to condition when Professor Smith received it. In other words, it may have not have been dry initially, but he
when
received
it was collected.
Yeah. In the Scientific American Supplement, Volume 2, Dr. A. Mead Edwards, president of the Newark Scientific Association, writes that when he saw Mr. Brandeis's communication, his feeling was of conviction that propriety had been reestablished, or that the problem had been solved, as he expresses it. Knowing Mr. Brandeis well, he had called upon that upholder of respectability to see the substance that had been identified as nostoc. But he had also called upon Dr. Hamilton, who had a specimen, and Dr. Hamilton had declared it to be lung tissue.
Oh, my gosh.
Dr. Edwards writes of the substance that had so completely or beautifully...
Must have come from the Amazon. They're the lungs of the world.
Of course. It had so completely and beautifully been identified as nostoc, but it turned out to be lung tissue also.
Oh, my gosh.
So he wrote to other persons who had specimens and identified other specimens as masses of cartilage or muscular fibers. As to whence it came, I have no theory, he says. Nevertheless, he endorses the local explanation, and a bizarre thing it is. A flock of gorged, heavy-weighted buzzards, but far up and invisible in the clear sky, had disgorged. So, in other words, puking buzzards.
Ugh. Ugh. It's the worst puke you can imagine.
Another professor lists the substance in his bibliography as fish spawn. McCarty, in the Monthly Weather Review in May of 1918, lists it as a jelly-like material supposed to have been the dried spawn either of fishes or of some batrachian. Let me look that one up. What's a batrachian? Another term for anuran, which is, now look that one up. Anuran. I don't know. Okay. Great dictionary there. Anuran.
An amphibian of the order Anura, a frog or a toad.
Okay. So we are merging away from carnal to gelatinous substances, and here there is an abundance of instances or reports of instances. These data are so improper, they're obscene to the science of today, but we shall see that science, before it became so rigorous, was not so prudish. Chladni was not, and Greg was not. So I shall have to accept myself that gelatinous substance has often fallen from the sky, or that far up or far away the whole sky is gelatinous, or that meteors may tear through and detach fragments, or that fragments are brought down by storms, that the twinkling of stars is penetration of light through something that quivers.
You think he's just being funny?
Oh
here?
yeah, he's just blue sky.
Just
here,
like
you know,
a gelatinous
no pun
shield
intended.
over.
Yeah.
It's that's what it is. It's the space program now.
It's
We've
the-
busted through the gelatinous
It's
layer.
the fall of the firmament.
Yeah.
He says, I think myself that it would be absurd to say that the whole sky is gelatinous. It seems more acceptable that only certain areas are. Humboldt in Cosmos says that all our data in this respect must be, quote, classed amongst the mythical fables of mythology, unquote. He is very sure, but a little redundant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
Well, we shall be opposed by the standard resistances. There in the first place, or up from one place in a whirlwind and down in another. So we shall not bother to be very convincing one way or another because of the overshadowing of the datum which we shall end up, or with which we shall end up. It will mean that something had been in a stationary position for several days over a small part of a small town of England. This is the revolutionary thing that we have alluded to before. Whether the substance were nostoc or spawn or some kind of a larval nexus doesn't matter so much. If it stood in the sky for several days, we rank with Moses as a chronicler of improprieties. Or was that story or datum we mean told by Moses? Then we shall have so many records of gelatinous substance said to have fallen with meteorites that, between these two phenomena, some of us will have to accept connection, or that there are at least vast gelatinous areas aloft, and that meteorites tear through, carrying down some of this substance.
It's crazy, dude. It's great. That's great.
You want a couple more, or should we wrap it up? I mean, this is account after account.
Yeah.
You ready to wrap it up?
Yeah. I just apologize to everybody who's on their lunch break for this part.
It's gross.
If you were enjoying your podcast over dinner.
Yeah, hopefully you weren't eating Jell-O.
Yes. But, I mean, beef flakes, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
We'll just keep it at that.
giant beef flakes
Yeah.
that turned out to be lung tissue.
Oh, jeez. Wow. He's got a really interesting writing style, as you said. It's it's great.
Yeah. And again, just to remind people, there is an audiobook version of this made by the guys over at Grimerica, narrated by Graham Dunlop. I am putting the links to that in the show notes. It's in the previous one. It'll be in this one. It'll be in all the rest of these. So if you want to hear the whole book, because I am skipping giant pieces of it, I'm trying to like zero in on the accounts and get some of his analysis, but I'm skipping whole sections where he's going back to, let's talk again about intermediateness and universality and locality and all that stuff. So yeah, if you want to get the entire thing, check the show notes out for links to either just, buy yourself the book or get the audiobook version.
I think the intermediateness idea is it's something that in a way we've been dealing with on the show so many times,
Yes.
right? It's like, well, you want to land on a specific theory or an idea, but then you see where it has like these
it
weird
gets fuzzy at the edges.
Yeah, exactly. It fuzzes into another one that you're like,
Yeah.
wow. I think it's cool.
It has a fine nap at the edges of these theories.
Right.
It's fuzzy.
Yeah, that's cool.
And again, it's interesting because most of the time you read, if you just took any one of these accounts and just sort of isolated it, you'd be like, that sounds like bullshit.
Yeah.
But number one, he's getting them from very respected sources. Okay. He isn't reading these from tabloids. These are coming from Nature, and now they are from correspondence. In other words, they're reports.
Yeah.
But these respected scientific
some
journals
cases, they
and
have
publications
samples
and
and
periodicals put them in. Yes, they have
Yeah.
samples and stuff. So yeah, this is what I love about this kind of stuff.
I can see how, coming from your perspective with the 411 stuff, that you say, well, we can discuss one case and then that's not it. It's like all of the cases together is where you really, the idea starts to grow that like, okay, some strange thing is happening.
Yeah, even though you can probably take a bunch of them and say, well, they do have prosaic explanations.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter. The patterns emerge anyway,
Right.
And even if patterns don't emerge, what emerges is the complete lack of a pattern in a bunch of cases, some of which must be, accurately described.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And he's setting it up purposefully in this manner to like, okay, well, he starts off with some really absurd claim and then he's like, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
We're not
Forget about
far
the
enough
horse.
in there.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And that's the other thing where I feel a kinship with him, because we do that on the show all the time too. Like, well, we'll delete that part, and he just totally doesn't. Right? He's like, yeah, I take some of that back. Instead of, he's an author, he could just delete the sentence. No, he's like, yeah, I take that back.
It's great.
It's got more credibility than just kids making stuff up, somewhat.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yes, it's always fun. Trying to think if there's anything else I needed to address. I don't think I think I said everything, all the updates I needed to at the beginning.
Yeah, we're all good. The show continues next week.
That's right. All right, guys. brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com if you want to send us emails. I read them all. Can't read them all on the show, but thank you so much for emailing us. And yeah, keep sending us stuff, and maybe I'll read it on the show. I have to sort, though, and it gets harder and harder every day to sort them.
Yeah.
I already, we read every email that I had in the backlog last week. And then there are 7 more out of all the ones I got that I wanted to read on this show. And that takes up too much time. I'm going to have to cut them down. Or they're going to build up and we have to do communication sessions. I don't know. I haven't decided which one would do.
Well,
it's all by whim. I don't plan it.
Well, here's the thing. Some people really enjoy the communications episodes where that's all it is.
Yeah.
And some people would rather not have to listen to 50 minutes of communications at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
So, it seems like a good compromise to do full communications episodes that people can skip if they don't like that stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause I like it.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that really like it. So we can do less in the beginning of the show and then do a communication episode like once a month or whatever. Or whatever it's necessary.
That sounds good, yeah. Like, we just need to not have it be 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have to stop me.
Okay. We can't have unprofessional people be the subject of the podcast. Because we are professional podcasters nowadays.
That's right.
I'm just kidding.
Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Like I said, did a bunch of updates there, fixed a bunch of things. And join the pyramid scheme. Help send us straight to pyramids. Help make the show better. Let us buy new equipment and other stuff to take on trips, which we have done. You can do that through Patreon or PayPal. There are links for that on the website. And also some crypto addresses if you'd prefer to donate that way. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. People did ask if we are now Podcasting 2.0 compatible. That is in the future. In other words, it's now possible.
Nerd alert.
Right. Not yet, but it can be done. And it will happen eventually. This was a big step towards that, but not yet. Anything else? Thanks, Jeff, for running the Discord. Join the Discord if you want to chat with fellow snakes. There's also a link for that on the website. And thanks to all the other admins in there, too. We got a bunch now, and they're really handling things. So I don't have to do anything.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love all of you so much. Thank you for everything you do.
Yes, and History Shift.
Yep.
For all the YouTube videos. it's possible that he's only going to have to make the videos now that have actual video, which should take a huge load of work.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work. Let's stop the show.
Nope. Mute.
That's the best way to do it.
That's right. You gotta stop the show.
Stop the show. I forgot
to make an addendum.
Yeah. I meant to mention that the Egypt tour 2022 with Ben from Uncharted X, us from the Brothers of the Serpent, and the dudes from Grimerica is now, the signups are now open to everyone. So you can check, I'll put links in the show notes. You can go to Ben's website and see the detailed itinerary, and there's links there for going to the Comet School to sign up and pay the deposit.
Come on.
That's right.
Let's do it. Also, we did a Patreon episode.
That's right.
After this show. And it was a great conversation, about an hour long. Went into some details about Fortean philosophy. Russ read some excerpts that he had skipped.
Yep.
And we just had a lot of discussion about where he's coming from, like his whole philosophy on science and the things that are kind of like on the edges of the accounts that Russ has been reading throughout the show. And it was great.
Yeah. And also Kyle read a article that tied right in with modern biological and evolutionary science.
Yes, that's right.
The one that he said at the beginning of this show that he was going to not read. So he read it on the Patreon.
This is one of my boring stories, but it actually was really good.
Yeah, it was good. And it wasn't too long either. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know.
Should have read it on the show. Yeah.
I should have.
Yep.
Oh, well, it's in the Patreon, so those of you who are supporters of the show, you get it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.